If you've ever felt like your willpower could use a little boost, an iron will might be just what you need. Orison Swett Marden takes you on a journey of self-discovery and strength, encouraging you to develop the kind of unshakable determination that can help you rise above life's challenges. With practical wisdom and inspiring examples, Marden shows that true power lies not just in physical strength, but in the strength of our character and the will to do what's right. This book dives into how aligning your will with a higher purpose, whatever that might mean for you, can transform your life and the world around you. It's not just about being tough or stubborn, but about choosing the right path, standing firm in your convictions, and making a difference with your actions. You'll find yourself nodding along as Marden reflects on what it truly means to have an iron will, and why it matters in today's world. Through poetic quotes, deep reflections, and real-life examples, an iron will is a gentle reminder that the will to succeed comes from within, and that we all have the ability to build a life full of meaning, purpose, and strength. Whether you're looking for inspiration or simply a way to push past doubts, this book is here to remind you that with the right will, anything is possible. Let us begin.
Welcome to a channel designed to transform your wasted time into something truly valuable. Here, every minute spent listening can be a step toward learning, growth, and self-discovery. Imagine using those pockets of time when you're working out, driving, cooking, or just waiting to dive into books that have left a profound impact on my life. These aren't just self-help titles, but a wide range of books, from classics to hidden gems, each one offering unique insights and lessons that changed me in some way or even saved me when I needed it most. I'm Parsa, and I created this channel as a personal archive of books that have been part of my journey. You'll find both well-known works and rare treasures I've stumbled upon, some summarized with the key details and spirit intact, and others in their entirety when copyright allows. I know from experience that even a few minutes of listening each day can make a difference. So wherever you are, let's make those spare moments count. Hit play and let's start exploring together.
An Iron Will by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 1. Training the Will. The education of the will is the object of our existence, Emerson declares, underscoring the profound role of willpower in shaping human character and destiny. Mill affirms this, calling character a completely fashioned will. The will, akin to the divine spark of creation, is central to human achievements, whether quiet or resolute, as seen in Wilberforce, Goodyear, or Grant, whose unyielding determination turned plans into reality. Failures often stem not from lack of talent, but from lack of resolve. It is impossible, Sharman observes, to look into the conditions under which the battle of life is being fought, without perceiving how much really depends upon the extent to which the willpower is cultivated, strengthened, and made operative in right directions. Like athletes in training, young people must actively prepare to develop a strong will. A struggle in the race of life. This necessity for willpower training is illustrated by the story of Sotirios Lous, the Greek peasant who won the marathon at the Olympian Games. From his plow, he began his unpretentious preparation to represent Greece before an international audience. His father's words, "You must only return a victor," lit a fire within him, and with quiet resolve, he entered the race. His determination, not just his speed, set him apart. When the race ended and Lous emerged victorious, the crowd celebrated wildly, offering him gifts, flowers, and even jeweled trinkets. Yet his gaze sought only his father, who pushed through the throng with trembling eagerness. When they finally met, Lous simply said, "You see, Father, I have obeyed." This moment exemplified the power of firm resolve and unyielding focus. Mental discipline. Just as an athlete trains the body, the mind must be disciplined to triumph in life's race. Professor Matthews explains that self-mastery, or the ability to focus entirely on one task, is achieved through repeated, strenuous effort over time. While the process is gradual, its value is beyond measure. Professor Huxley further emphasizes that education's greatest gift is teaching the ability to do what must be done, when it must be done, whether one feels like it or not. While this lesson is difficult to master, its significance cannot be overstated. Doing things once. Henry Ward Beecher was often asked how he accomplished so much more than others. His response was striking: "I don't do more, but less, than other people." They do all their work 3 times, once in anticipation, once in actuality, and once in rumination. I do mine in actuality alone, doing it once instead of 3 times. Beecher's ability to concentrate his willpower allowed him to fully focus on one task at a time before moving on to the next. Observers of successful individuals often note this quality, the ability to channel energy into a single point. Indeed, one of life's great secrets lies in focusing the scattered rays of the mind to achieve one's goals. Centralizing force, the mental reservoir of most people, is like a leaky dam, where much of the water flows out without going over the wheel and doing the work of the mill. This habit of mind wandering, of worrying about this and that, prevents individuals from focusing their energies toward achievement. Genius, that power which dazzles mortal eyes, is oft but perseverance in disguise. Many people could have succeeded had they connected their fragmented efforts. Spasmodic, disconnected attempts, without concentration and fixed purpose, will never lead to success. It is the continuity of purpose that truly achieves results. Learning to swim to learn to run, one must run; to learn to swim, one must swim. Similarly, to develop willpower, one must practice it in the business of life. As an English essayist points out, the man that exercises his will makes it a stronger and more effective force in proportion to the extent to which such exercise is intelligently and perseveringly maintained. The act of exercising willpower strengthens it. The will grows stronger through practice. Sticking with a task until mastery is achieved tests both intellectual discipline and strength. Dr. Theodore Coiler notes the lack of perseverance in many men. They can make a sudden dash, but they lack grit. They are easily discouraged. They get on as long as everything goes smoothly, but when there is friction they lose heart. These men rely on others for strength and direction. They lack the independence to step boldly from the crowd and act fearlessly. The big trees to succeed at the highest level, careful planning is essential. One must accumulate reserve power to be prepared for any challenge. Thomas Starr King was deeply impressed by the great trees of California, which symbolized the power of reserve. He said, it was the thought of the reserve energies that had been compacted into them. The mountains had given them their iron and rich stimulants, the hills had given them their soil, the clouds had given their rain and snow, and 1,000 summers and winters had poured forth their treasures about their vast roots. No one can achieve greatness without having made their life a reservoir of power, knowledge, and energy that will support them when challenges arise. As a great scholar and writer once said, if I were 20 and had but 10 years to live, I would spend the first 9 years accumulating knowledge and getting ready for the 10th. I will. There are no 2 words in the English language that stand out with greater strength and determination than I will. These words embody confidence, power, decision, and unyielding purpose. They speak of triumph over difficulties, victory in the face of discouragement, and the will to fulfill promises and meet challenges. They represent the lofty aspirations and the solid actions that drive progress. As one wise person said, he who is silent is forgotten, he who does not advance falls back, he who stops is overwhelmed, distanced, crushed, he who ceases to become greater, becomes smaller. He who leaves off gives up. The stationary is the beginning of the end. It precedes death. To live is to achieve, to will without ceasing. Park Benjamin captures this spirit with his words, "Be thou a hero, let thy might tramp on eternal snows its way, and through the ebon walls of night, HEW down a passage unto day." The rulers of destiny there is no chance, no destiny, no fate, can circumvent, or hinder, or control the firm resolve of a determined soul. Gifts count for nothing, will alone is great, all things give way before it soon or late. What obstacle can stay the mighty force of the sea-seeking river in its course, or cause the ascending orb of day to wait? Each well-born soul must win what it deserves. Let the fool prate of luck. The fortunate is he whose earnest purpose never swerves, whose slightest action or inaction serves the one great aim. Ella Wheeler Wilcox Emerson reminds us that there is always room for a man of force. The king is the man who can. Carlyle. Chapter 2. The rulers of destiny there is no chance, no destiny, no fate, can circumvent, or hinder, or control the firm resolve of a determined soul. Gifts count for nothing, will alone is great, all things give way before it soon or late. What obstacle can stay the mighty force of the sea-seeking river in its course, or cause the ascending orb of day to wait? Each well-born soul must win what it deserves. Let the fool prate of luck. The fortunate is he whose earnest purpose never swerves, whose slightest action or inaction serves the one great aim. Ella Wheeler Wilcox. There is always room for a man of force. Emerson. The king is the man who can. Carlyle. A strong, defiant purpose is many-handed and lays hold of whatever is near that can serve it. It has a magnetic power that draws to itself whatever is kindred. T.T. Munger. What is willpower? What is willpower, in its essence, but energy of character? Energy of will, the self-originating force, is the soul of every great character. Where it is, there is life. Where it is not, there is faintness, helplessness, and despondency. Let it be your first study to teach the world that you are not wood and straw, that there is some iron in you. Men who have left their mark upon the world have been men of great and prompt decision. The achievements of willpower are almost beyond computation. Scarcely anything seems impossible to the man who can will strongly enough and long enough. One talent with a will behind it will accomplish more than 10 without it, as a thimbleful of powder in a rifle, the bore of whose barrel will give it direction, will do greater execution than a carload burned in the open air. The wills, the wonts, and the can'ts. There are 3 kinds of people in the world, says a recent writer: the wills, the won'ts, and the can'ts. The first accomplish everything, the second oppose everything, the third fail in everything. The shores of fortune, as Foster says, are covered with the stranded wrecks of men of brilliant ability, who lacked courage, faith, and decision, and therefore perished in sight of more resolute but less capable adventurers, who succeeded in making port. If I were to express in a word the secret of so many failures among those who started out with high hopes, I would say they lacked willpower. They could not half will, and what is a man without a will? He is like an engine without steam. Genius unexecuted is no more genius than a bushel of acorns is a forest of oaks. Will has been called the spinal column of personality. The will in its relation to life, says an English writer, may be compared at once to the rudder and to the steam engine of a vessel, on the confined and related action of which it depends entirely for the direction of its course and the vigor of its movement. Strength of will is the test of a young man's possibilities. Can he will strongly enough and hold whatever he undertakes with an iron grip? It is the iron grip that takes and holds. What chance is there, in this crowding, pushing, selfish, greedy world, where everything is pusher or pushed, for a young man with no will, no grip on life? The man who would forge to the front in this competitive age must be a man of prompt and determined decision. A tailor's needle. It is in one of Ben Jonson's old plays: when I once take the humor of a thing, I am like your tailor's needle, I go through with it. This is not different from Richelieu, who said, when I have once taken a resolution, I go straight to my aim, I overthrow all, I cut down all. And in business affairs, the counsel of Rothschild is to the same effect: do without fail that which you determine to do. Gladstone's children were taught to accomplish to the end whatever they might begin, no matter how insignificant the undertaking might be. What is worse than rashness? It is irresolution that is worse than rashness. He that shoots, says Feltham, may sometimes hit the mark. But he that shoots not at all can never hit it. Irresolution is like an ague: it shakes not this nor that limb, but all the body is at once in a fit. The man who is forever twisting and turning, backing and filling, hesitating and dawdling, shuffling and parleying, weighing and balancing, splitting hairs over non-essentials, listening to every new motive which presents itself, will never accomplish anything. But the positive man, the decided man, is a power in the world and stands for something. You can measure him, and estimate the work that his energy will accomplish. Opportunity is coy, is swift, and is gone before the slow, the unobservant, the indolent, or the careless can seize her. Vigilance in watching opportunity, said Phelps, tact and daring in seizing upon opportunity, force and persistence in crowding opportunity to its utmost of possible achievement. These are the martial virtues which must command success. The best men, remarked Chapin, are not those who have waited for chances, but who have taken them. besieged the chance, conquered the chance, and made chance the servitor. Is it not possible to classify successes and failures by their various degrees of willpower? A man who can resolve vigorously upon a course of action, and turns neither to the right nor to the left, though a paradise tempt him, who keeps his eyes upon the goal, whatever distracts him, is sure of success. Not every vessel that sails from Tarshish will bring back the gold of Ophir. But shall it therefore rot in the harbor? No. Give its sails to the wind. Conscious power, says Mills, exists within the mind of every one. Sometimes its existence is unrealized, but it is there. It is there to be developed and brought forth, like the culture of that obstinate but beautiful flower, the orchid. To allow it to remain dormant is to place oneself in obscurity, to trample on one's ambition, to smother one's faculties. To develop it is to individualize all that is best within you, and give it to the world. It is by an absolute knowledge of yourself, the proper estimate of your own value. There is hardly a reader, says an experienced educator, who will not be able to recall the early life of at least one young man whose childhood was spent in poverty, and who, in boyhood, expressed a firm desire to secure a higher education. If, a little later, that desire became a declared resolve, soon the avenues opened to that end. That desire and resolve created an atmosphere which attracted the forces necessary to the attainment of the purpose. Many of these young men will tell us that, as long as they were hoping, striving, and longing, mountains of difficulty rose before them, but that when they fashioned their hopes into fixed purposes, aid came unsought to help them on the way. Do you believe in yourself? The man without self-reliance and an iron will is the plaything of chance, the puppet of his environment, the slave of circumstances. Are not doubts the greatest of enemies? If you would succeed up to the limit of your possibilities, must you not constantly hold to the belief that you are success organized, and that you will be successful, no matter what opposes? You are never to allow a shadow of doubt to enter your mind that the Creator intended you to win in life's battle. Regard every suggestion that your life may be a failure, that you are not made like those who succeed, and that success is not for you, as a traitor, and expel it from your mind as you would a thief from your house. There is something sublime in the youth who possesses the spirit of boldness and fearlessness, who has proper confidence in his ability to do and dare. The world takes us at our own valuation. It believes in the man who believes in himself, but it has little use for the timid man, the one who is never certain of himself, who cannot rely on his own judgment, who craves advice from others, and is afraid to go ahead on his own account. It is the man with a positive nature, the man who believes that he is equal to the emergency, who believes he can do the thing he attempts, who wins the confidence of his fellow man. He is beloved because he is brave and self-sufficient. Those who have accomplished great things in the world have been, as a rule, bold, aggressive, and self-confident. They dared to step out from the crowd and act in an original way. They were not afraid to be generals. There is little room in this crowding, competing age for the timid, vacillating youth. He who would succeed today must not only be brave, but must also dare to take chances. He who waits for certainty never wins. The law of the soul is eternal endeavor, that bears the man onward and upward forever. A man can be too confiding in others, but never too confident in himself. Never admit defeat or poverty. Stoutly assert your divine right to hold your head up and look the world in the face, step bravely to the front whatever opposes, and the world will make way for you. No one will insist upon your rights while you yourself doubt that you have any. Believe you were made for the place you fill. Put forth your whole energies. Be awake, electrify yourself, go forth to the task. A young man once said to his employer, "Don't give me an easy job. I want to handle heavy boxes, shoulder great loads. I would like to lift a big mountain and throw it into the sea," and he stretched out two brawny arms, while his honest eyes danced and his whole being glowed with conscious strength. The world admires the determined doer. The world in its heart admires the stern, determined doer. The world turns aside to let any man pass who knows whither he is going. It is wonderful how even the apparent casualties of life seem to bow to a spirit that will not bow to them, and yield to assist a design, after having in vain attempted to frustrate it. The man who succeeds, says Prentice Mulford, must always in mind or imagination live, move, think, and act as if he gained that success, or he never will gain it. We go forth, said Emerson, austere, dedicated, believing in the iron links of destiny, and will not turn on our heels to save our lives. A book, a bust, or only the sound of a name shoots a spark through the nerves, and we suddenly believe in will. We cannot hear of personal vigor of any kind, great power of performance, without fresh resolution. Chapter 3. Force of will in camp and field. Oh, what miracles have been wrought by the self-confidence, the self-determination of an iron will. What impossible deeds have been performed by it. It was this that took Napoleon over the Alps in midwinter. It took Farragut and Dewey past the cannons, torpedoes, and mines of the enemy. It led Nelson and Grant to victory. It has been the great tonic in the world of discovery, invention, and art. It has helped to win the 1,000 triumphs in war and science that were deemed impossible. The secret of Jeanne d'Arc's success was not alone in rare decision of character, but in the seeing of visions which inspired her to self-confidence, confidence in her divine mission. It was an iron will that gave Nelson command of the British fleet, a title, and a statue at Trafalgar Square. It was the keynote of his character when he said, "When I don't know whether to fight or not, I always fight." It was an iron will that was brought into play when Horatius, with 2 companions, held 90,000 Tuscans at bay until the bridge across the Tiber had been destroyed. When Leonidas at Thermopylae checked the mighty march of Xerxes, when Themistocles, off the coast of Greece, shattered the Persian armada, when Caesar, finding his army hard pressed, seized spear and buckler and snatched victory from defeat, when Winkelried gathered to his breast a sheaf of Austrian spears and opened a path for his comrades, when Wellington fought in many climes without ever being conquered, when Ney, on 100 fields, changed apparent disaster into brilliant triumph, when Sheridan arrived from Winchester as the Union retreat was becoming a rout and turned the tide, when Sherman signaled his men to hold the fort, knowing that their leader was coming. History furnishes thousands of examples of men who have seized occasions to accomplish results deemed impossible by those less resolute. Prompt decision and whole-souled action sweep the world before them. Who was the organizer of the modern German Empire? Was he not the man of iron? Napoleon and Grant, what would you do if you were besieged in a place entirely destitute of provisions? Asked the examiner when Napoleon was a cadet. If there were anything to eat in the enemy's camp, I should not be concerned. When Paris was in the hands of a mob, and the authorities were panic-stricken, and came a man who said, "I know a young officer who can quell this mob. Send for him." Napoleon was sent for, he came, he subjugated the mob, he subjugated the authorities, he ruled France, then conquered Europe. On May 10, 1796, Napoleon carried the bridge at Lodi, in the face of the Austrian batteries, trained upon the French end of the structure. Behind him were 6,000 troops. Napoleon massed 4,000 grenadiers at the head of the bridge, with a battalion of 300 carbineers in front. At the tap of the drum, the foremost assailants wheeled from the cover of the street wall under a terrible hail of grape and canister, attempting to pass the gateway to the bridge. The front ranks went down like stalks of grain before a reaper, the column staggered and reeled backward, and the valiant grenadiers were appalled by the task before them. Without a word or a look of reproach, Napoleon placed himself at their head, and his aides and generals rushed to his side. Forward again, over heaps of dead that choked the passage, and a quick run, counted by seconds only, carried the column across 200 yards of clear space. Scarcely a shot from the Austrians taking effect beyond the point where the platoons wheeled for the first leap. The guns of the enemy were not aimed at the advance. The advance was too quick for the Austrian gunners. So sudden and miraculous was it all that the Austrian artillerymen abandoned their guns instantly, and their supports fled in a panic instead of rushing to the front to meet the French onslaught. This Napoleon had counted on in making the bold attack. What was Napoleon but the thunderbolt of war? He once journeyed from Spain to Paris at 17 miles an hour in the saddle. "Is it possible to cross the path?" asked Napoleon of the engineers who had been sent to explore the dreaded pass of St. Bernard. "Perhaps," was the hesitating reply. "It is within the limits of possibility." "Forward, then." Yet Ulysses S. Grant, a young man unknown to fame, with neither money nor influence, with no patrons or friends, in 6 years fought more battles, gained more victories, captured more prisoners, took more spoils, and commanded more men than Napoleon did in 20 years. The great thing about him, said Lincoln, is cool persistence. Don't swear, fight. When the Spanish fire on San Juan Hill became almost unbearable, some of the Rough Riders began to swear. Colonel Wood, with the wisdom of a good leader, called out, amid the whistle of Mauser bullets, don't swear, fight. In a skirmish at Salamanca, while the enemy's guns were pouring shot into his regiment, Sir William Napier's men became disobedient. He at once ordered a halt and flogged 4 of the ringleaders under fire. The men yielded at once, and then marched 3 miles under a heavy cannonade as coolly as if it were a review. When Pelissier, the Crimean chief of Zouaves, struck an officer with a whip, the man drew a pistol that misfired. The chief replied, fellow, I order you a 3-day arrest for not having your arms in better order. The man of iron will is cool in the hour of danger. I had T.O. run like a cyclone. This was what Roosevelt said about his pushing on up San Juan Hill ahead of his regiment. I had to run like a cyclone to stay in front and keep from being run over. The personal heroism of Hobson, or of Cushing, who blew up the Albemarle 40 years ago, was but the expression of magnificent willpower. It was this which was the basis of General Wheeler's unparalleled military advancement, a second lieutenant at 23, a colonel at 24, a brigadier general at 25, a major general at 26, a corps commander at 27, and a lieutenant general at 28. General Wheeler had 16 horses killed under him, and a great number wounded. His saddle equipment and clothes were frequently struck by the missiles of the enemy. He was 3 times wounded, once painfully. He had 32 staff officers, or acting staff officers, killed or wounded. In almost every case, they were immediately by his side. No officer was ever more exposed to the missiles of death than Joseph Wheeler. What is this imperial characteristic of manhood, an iron will, but that which underlies all magnificent achievement, whether by heroes of the Light Brigade or the heroic firefighters of our great cities? I had to run like a cyclone. This was what Roosevelt said about his pushing on up San Juan Hill ahead of his regiment. I had to run like a cyclone to stay in front and keep from being run over. The personal heroism of Hobson, or of Cushing, who blew up the Albemarle 40 years ago, was but the expression of magnificent willpower. It was this which formed the foundation of General Wheeler's unparalleled military advancement, a second lieutenant at 23, a colonel at 24, a brigadier general at 25, a major general at 26, a corps commander at 27, and a lieutenant general at 28. General Wheeler had 16 horses killed under him, and many more wounded. His saddle equipment and clothes were frequently struck by enemy missiles. He was wounded 3 times, once quite painfully. He had 32 staff officers, or acting staff officers, killed or wounded, with many falling immediately by his side. No officer has ever been more exposed to death's missiles than Joseph Wheeler. What is this imperial characteristic of manhood, an iron will, if not the force behind all monumental achievements, whether in the heroic feats of the Light Brigade or the brave firefighters who rush into danger to save lives? The iron will is the key that unlocks great accomplishment and leads to victory against all odds. Chapter 4. Willpower in its relation to health and disease. There is no doubt that, as a rule, great decision of character is usually accompanied by great constitutional firmness. Men who have been noted for great firmness of character have usually been strong and robust. As a rule, it is the strong physical man who carries weight and conviction. Take, for example, William the Conqueror, as he is pictured by Green in his history. The very spirit of the Sirabers from whom he sprang seemed embodied in his gigantic form, his enormous strength, his savage countenance, his desperate bravery. No other knight under heaven, his enemies confessed, was William's peer. No other man could bend William's bow. His mace crashed through a ring of English warriors to the foot of the standard. He rose to his greatest heights in moments when other men despaired. No other man who ever sat upon the throne of England was this man's match. Or take Webster. Sidney Smith said, Webster is a living lie, because no man on earth can be as great as he looks. Carlyle said of him, one would incline at sight to back him against the world. His very physique was eloquent. Men yielded their wills to his at sight. The great prizes of life ever fall to the robust, the stalwart, the strong, not necessarily to a huge muscle or a powerful frame, but to a strong vitality, a great nervous energy. It is the Lord Broughams, working almost continuously for 144 hours. It is the Napoleons, 20 hours in the saddle. It is the Franklins, camping out in the open air at 70. It is the Gladstones, firmly grasping the helm of the ship of state at 84, tramping miles every day, and chopping down huge trees at 85, who accomplish the great things of life. To prosper, you must improve your brain power, and nothing helps the brain more than a healthy body. The race of today is only to be won by those who will study to keep their bodies in such good condition that their minds are able and ready to sustain the high pressure on memory and mind, which our present fierce competition engenders. It is health, rather than strength, that is now wanted. Health is essentially the requirement of our time to enable us to succeed in life. In all modern occupations, from the nurseries to the school, from the school to the shop or world beyond, the brain and nerve strain go on, continuously, augmenting, and intensifying. As a rule, physical vigor is the condition of a great career. Stonewall Jackson, early in life, determined to conquer every weakness he had, physical, mental, and moral. He held all of his powers with a firm hand. To his great self-discipline and self-mastery, he owed his success. So determined was he to harden himself to the weather that he could not be induced to wear an overcoat in winter. "I will not give in to the cold," he said. For a year, on account of dyspepsia, he lived on buttermilk and stale bread, and wore a wet shirt next his body because his doctor advised it, although everybody else ridiculed the idea. This was while he was a professor at the Virginia Military Institute. His doctor advised him to retire at 9 o'clock, and, no matter where he was or who was present, he always sought his bed at the minute. He adhered rigidly through life to this stern system of discipline. Such self-training, such self-conquest, gives one great power over others. It is equal to genius itself. "I can do nothing," said Grant, "without 9 hours' sleep." What else is so grand as to stand on life's threshold, fresh, young, hopeful, with a consciousness of power equal to any emergency, a master of the situation? The glory of a young man is his strength. Our great need in the world today is for men and women who are good animals. To endure the strain of our concentrated civilization, the coming man and woman must have an excess of animal spirits. They must have a robustness of health. Mere absence of disease is not health. It is the overflowing fountain, not the one half full, that gives life and beauty to the valley below. Only he is healthy who exults in mere animal existence, whose very life is a luxury, who feels a bounding pulse throughout his body, who feels life in every limb, as dogs do when scouring over the field, or as boys do when gliding over fields of ice. 2. Yet in spite of all this, in defiance of it, we know that an iron will is often triumphant in the contest with physical infirmity. Brave spirits are a balsam to themselves. There is a nobleness of mind that heals wounds beyond salves. "One day," said a noted rope walker, "I signed an agreement to wheel a barrow along a rope on a given day. A day or two before I was seized with lumbago. I called in my medical man and told him I must be cured by a certain day, not only because I should lose what I hoped to earn, but also forfeit a large sum. I got no better, and the doctor forbade my getting up. I told him, 'What do I want with your advice? If you cannot cure me, of what good is your advice?' When I got to the place, there was the doctor protesting I was unfit for the exploit. I went on, though I felt like a frog with my back. I got ready my pole and my barrow, took hold of the handles, and wheeled it along the rope as well as I ever did. When I got to the end, I wheeled it back again, and when this was done I was a frog again. What made me able to wheel the barrow? It was my reserve will. What does he know, asks the sage, who has not suffered? Did not Schiller produce his greatest tragedies in the midst of physical suffering almost amounting to torture? Handel was never greater than when, warned by palsy of the approach of death, and struggling with distress and suffering, he sat down to compose the great works which have made his name immortal in music. Beethoven was almost totally deaf and burdened with sorrow when he produced his greatest works. Milton, writing "Who best can suffer, best can do," wrote at his best when in feeble health, and when poor and blind. Yet I argue not against heaven's hand or will, nor bate a jot of heart or hope, but still bear up and steer right onward. The Rev. William H. Milburn, who lost his sight when a child, studied for the ministry and was ordained before he attained his majority. He has written half a dozen books, among them a very careful history of the Mississippi Valley. He has long been chaplain of the lower house of Congress. Blind Fanny Crosby, of New York, was a teacher of the blind for many years. She has written nearly 3,000 hymns, among which are, "Pass Me Not, O Gentle Savior," "Rescue the Perishing," "Savior More Than Life to Me," and "Jesus Keep Me Near the Cross." "The truest help we can render one who is afflicted," said Bishop Brooks, "is not to take his burden from him, but to call out his best energy, that he may be able to bear." "The truest help we can render one who is afflicted," said Bishop Brooks, "is not to take his burden from him, but to call out his best energy, that he may be able to bear." What a mighty will Darwin had! He was in continual ill health. He was in constant suffering. His patience was marvelous. No one but his wife knew what he endured. For 40 years, says his son, he never knew one day of health, yet during those 40 years he unremittingly forced himself to do the work from which the mightiest minds and the strongest constitutions would have shrunk. He had a wonderful power of sticking to a subject. He used almost to apologize for his patience, saying that he could not bear to be beaten, as if it were a sign of weakness. Bulwer advises us to refuse to be ill, never to tell people we are ill, never to own it ourselves. Illness is one of those things which a man should resist on principle. Do not dwell upon your ailments nor study your symptoms. Never allow yourself to be convinced that you are not the complete master of yourself. Stoutly affirm your own superiority over bodily ills. We should keep a high ideal of health and harmony constantly before the mind. Is not the mind the natural protector of the body? We cannot believe that the Creator has left the whole human race entirely at the mercy of only about half a dozen specific drugs which always act with certainty. There is a divine remedy placed within us for many of the ills we suffer. If we only knew how to use this power of will and mind to protect ourselves, many of us would be able to carry youth and cheerfulness with us into the teens of our second century. The mind has undoubted power to preserve and sustain physical youth and beauty, to keep the body strong and healthy, to renew life, and to preserve it from decay, many years longer than it does now. The longest-lived men and women have, as a rule, been those who have attained great mental and moral development. They have lived in the upper region of a higher life, beyond the reach of much of the jar, the friction, and the discords which weaken and shatter most lives. Every physician knows that courageous people, with indomitable will, are not half as likely to contract contagious diseases as the timid, the vacillating, the irresolute. A thoughtful physician once assured a friend that if an express agent were to visit New Orleans in the yellow fever season, having $40,000 in his care, he would be in little danger of the fever so long as he kept possession of the money. Let him once deliver that into other hands, and the sooner he left the city, the better. Napoleon used to visit the plague hospitals even when the physicians dreaded to go, and actually put his hands upon the plague-stricken patients. He said the man who was not afraid could vanish the plague. A willpower like this is a strong tonic to the body. Such a will has taken many men from apparent deathbeds and enabled them to perform wonderful deeds of valor. When told by his physicians that he must die, Douglas Jerrold said, "and leave a family of helpless children, I won't die." He kept his word and lived for years. Chapter 5. The Romance of Achievement Under Difficulties. What doth the poor man's son inherit? Stout muscles, and a sinewy heart, a hearty frame, a heartier spirit. King of two hands, he does his part in every useful toil and art, a heritage it seems to me, a king might wish to hold in fee. Lowell, has not God given every man a capital to start with? Are we not born rich? He is rich who has good health, a sound body, good muscles. He is rich who has a good head, a good disposition, a good heart. He is rich who has two good hands, with 5 chances on each. Equipped? Every man is equipped as only God could equip him. What a fortune he possesses in the marvelous mechanism of his body and mind. It is individual effort that has achieved everything worth achieving. The fun of the little game. A big Australian, 6'4", James Tyson, died not long ago with a property of $25 million, who began life as a farm hand. Tyson cared little for money. He used to say of it, "I shall just leave it behind me when I go. I shall have done with it then, and it will not concern me afterwards." But, he would add, with a characteristic semi-exultant snap of the fingers, the money is nothing. It was the little game that was the fun. Being asked, what was the little game, he replied with an energy of concentration peculiar to him, "Fighting the desert. That has been my work. I have been fighting the desert all my life, and I have won. I have put water where was no water, and beef where was no beef. I have put fences where there were no fences, and roads where there were no roads. Nothing can undo what I have done, and millions will be happier for it after I am long dead and forgotten." Has not self-help accomplished about all the great things of the world? How many young men falter, faint, and dally with their purpose because they have no capital to start with, and wait for some good luck to give them a lift? But success is the child of drudgery and perseverance. It cannot be coaxed or bribed. Pay the price, and it is yours. A constant struggle, a ceaseless battle to bring success from inhospitable surroundings, is the price of all great achievements. Conquerors of fortune. Benjamin Franklin had this tenacity of purpose in a wonderful degree. When he started in the printing business in Philadelphia, he carried his material through the streets on a wheelbarrow. He hired one room for his office, workroom, and sleeping room. He found a formidable rival in the city and invited him to his room. Pointing to a piece of bread from which he had just eaten his dinner, he said, "Unless you can live cheaper than I can, you cannot starve me out." It was so that he proved the wisdom of Edmund Burke's saying, that he that wrestles with us strengthens our nerves, and sharpens our skill. Our antagonist is our helper. The poor and friendless lad, George Peabody, weary, footsore, and hungry, called at a tavern in Concord, New Hampshire, and asked to be allowed to saw wood for lodging and breakfast. Yet he worked for everything he ever received, and outmatched the poverty of early days. Gideon Lee could not even get shoes to wear in winter when a boy, but he went to work barefoot in the snow. He made a bargain with himself to work 16 hours a day. He fulfilled it to the letter, and when from interruption he lost time, he robbed himself of sleep to make it up. He became a wealthy merchant of New York, mayor of the city, and a member of Congress. Commercial courage. The business affairs of a gentleman named Rouse were once in a complicated condition, owing to his conflicting interests in various states, and he was thrown into prison. While confined, he wrote on the walls of his cell, "I am 40 years of age this day. When I am 50, I shall be worth $500,000, and by the time I am 60, I shall be worth $1 million." He lived to accumulate more than $3 million. The ruin which overtakes so many merchants, says Whipple, is due not so much to their lack of business talent as to their lack of business nerve. Cyrus W. Field had retired from business with a large fortune when he became possessed with the idea that by means of a cable laid upon the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, telegraphic communication could be established between Europe and America. He plunged into the undertaking with all the force of his being. It was an incredibly hard contest. The forests of Newfoundland, the lobby in Congress, the unskilled handling of breaks on his Agamemnon cable, a second and a third breaking of the cable at sea, the cessation of the current in a well-laid cable, the snapping of a superior cable on the Great Eastern, all these availed not to foil the iron will of Field, whose final triumph was that of mental energy in the application of science. The story of Weed and Greeley reflects a common theme in America, men who, from humble beginnings, rose to prominence through sheer willpower. Many of the world's most eminent men have faced poverty and adversity in their early years, yet triumphed over these challenges. The astronomer Kepler, for example, struggled with constant anxieties and had to resort to astrology for a living, despite his deep commitment to science. Linnaeus, while pursuing his education, was so poor that he had to mend his shoes with folded paper and often begged for meals. Isaac Newton, during the 10 years of his greatest discoveries, struggled financially and could barely afford to pay dues to the Royal Society. Humphrey Davy, despite having limited resources, worked in an apothecary store, where he made do with basic materials to experiment and study. George Stephenson, one of 8 children, grew up in poverty, but managed to become a great inventor by studying engines and constantly experimenting with machines. These men succeeded not by luck, but by unwavering persistence, constant self-discipline, and a refusal to give up. They exemplified the idea that determination and willpower are key drivers of achievement, often rising above their circumstances to achieve greatness. We rise by the things that are under our feet, by what we have mastered of good or gain. Talent in Tatters. The story of Michelangelo, who overcame extreme poverty to become one of the greatest artists in history, is another example. Despite working under difficult conditions and struggling financially, he persisted, his unconquered will fueling his path to greatness. Similarly, other great figures, such as James Sharpies, who became a renowned blacksmith artist, showed that talent, combined with determination, could turn difficult circumstances into the foundation for extraordinary achievement. Even in professions that demanded sacrifice, like painting, sculpture, and scientific exploration, figures like Kepler, Burns, and Faraday worked tirelessly despite their hardships. Their achievements were not the result of their initial circumstances, but rather of their relentless drive and determination to overcome the obstacles in their path. These stories of perseverance are reminders that the power to rise above challenges lies within us, fueled by determination, focus, and an unwavering will. Chapter 6, Staying Power. Never give up. There are chances and changes, helping the hopeful, 100 to 1, and, through the chaos, higher wisdom arranges ever success, if you'll only hold on. Never give up, for the wisest is boldest, knowing that providence mingles the cup, and of all maxims, the best, as the oldest, is the stern watchword of never give up. Holmes' success in most things depends on knowing how long it takes to succeed. Montesquieu. The power to hold on is a key characteristic of all men who have accomplished great things. They may have weaknesses or eccentricities, but persistence is always present in successful people. They face opposition, discouragement, and misfortune with resilience, refusing to be disheartened by setbacks. It's not so much about brilliance or resources, but about persistence and an unwavering purpose that defines greatness. Those who succeed are those who keep pushing forward, not by believing themselves to be geniuses, but by understanding that success comes through determined, persistent effort. Audubon's resolve. Audubon, after years of working in the forests, suffered a great loss when 200 of his priceless drawings were destroyed by mice. He writes about the devastating moment. A poignant flame pierced my brain like an arrow of fire, and for several weeks I was prostrated with fever. At length physical and moral strength awoke within me. Again I took my gun, my game bag, my portfolio, and my pencils, and plunged once more into the depths of the forests. Carlyle's determination. Similarly, Carlyle faced a crushing blow while writing his history of the French Revolution. After the first volume was ready for publication, he loaned the manuscript to a neighbor who left it lying on the floor. The servant girl unknowingly burned it in the fire. It was a bitter setback, but Carlyle didn't give up. After months of hard work poring over manuscripts, he reproduced everything that had been lost in minutes. Proceed, and light will dawn. The struggles of many great minds are often marked by periods of poverty and misfortune. Yet, many of these individuals persisted and ultimately triumphed. The mathematician D'Alembert once encouraged a student with a note, "Go on, sir, go on. The difficulties you meet with will resolve themselves as you advance. Proceed, and light will dawn and shine with increasing clearness on your path." These words became a guiding principle in Arago's life. Balzac's tenacity. Balzac, despite his early warnings about the challenges in literature, chose to become a king in his field. His 10-year battle against poverty led him to write 40 novels before he finally achieved success. His relentless effort and refusal to quit despite immense hardship exemplify the power of persistence. Zola struggles. Zola, facing extreme poverty, recalls his difficult years. "Often I went hungry for so long that it seemed as if I must die. I scarcely tasted meat from 1 month's end to another, and for 2 days I lived on 3 apples. Fire, even on the coldest nights, was an undreamed of luxury, and I was the happiest man in Paris when I could get a candle, by the light of which I might study at night. Samuel Johnson's resolve. Samuel Johnson, despite his struggles, never gave up. He lived with holes in his shoes, endured harsh poverty, and worked tirelessly for 13 years. His determination exemplified the ability to keep going when everything seemed bleak. Emerson's reflection on adversity. Emerson, in his youth, faced difficulties that many today might never know. He recalls not having enough money to buy a second volume of a book, but looking back, he saw how those experiences shaped him into the person he became. He believed that true strength lies in the tenacity of purpose, which persists through all changes in companions, fortunes, and opposition. Louisa May Alcott's defiance. When Louisa May Alcott first dreamed of becoming a writer, her father handed her a rejected manuscript from the editor of The Atlantic. The message read, "Tell Louisa to stick to her teaching, she can never succeed as a writer." But Louisa refused to be discouraged. She responded, "Tell him I will succeed as a writer, and someday I shall write for The Atlantic." Not long after, she did just that, and in time, she achieved her goal of making her family financially independent. The principle of persistence is universal. Whether in literature, science, or any field, those who stay the course, no matter how difficult the path, ultimately achieve greatness. It is not talent alone, but the determination to press on against all odds that leads to success. I trample on impossibilities, so it was said by Lord Chatham. Why, asked Mirabeau, should we call ourselves men, unless it be to succeed in everything everywhere? Charles J. Fox remarked, "It is all very well to tell me that a young man has distinguished himself by a brilliant first speech. He may go on satisfied with his first triumph, but show me a young man who has not succeeded at first, and has then gone on, and I will back that man to do better than those who succeeded at the first trial." Cobden, for example, completely broke down the first time he appeared on a platform in Manchester, and the chairman even apologized for him. But Cobden did not give up speaking until every poor man in England had a larger, better, and cheaper loaf. Similarly, young Disraeli, despite coming from a persecuted race, pushed his way through the middle and upper classes, eventually standing tall at the highest levels of political power. Initially ridiculed, rebuffed, and even hissed from the House of Commons, he simply said, "The time will come when you will hear me." And the time did come. Persistent purpose. A great deal is said about genius, talent, luck, chance, cleverness, and fine manners playing a large part in one's success. While those elements can be important, without a clear, determined purpose, none of them will guarantee success. Men often drift into various aspects of life, business, society, politics, or even religion, without a concrete goal in mind. If circumstances are favorable, things seem well, but if not, everything seems wrong. Stalker writes, "Most men merely drift through life, and the work they do is determined by 100 different circumstances. They might as well be doing anything else, or they would prefer to be doing nothing at all." What sets successful people apart is their doggedness and persistence of purpose. It doesn't matter how clever a young person is, whether they lead their class in school or outshine their peers in the community, they will not succeed without the essential quality of determined persistence. Many might possess great potential in fields like music, art, law, or medicine, but without persistence, they often fall short of success. The power of persistence. Persistence of purpose is its own power. It creates confidence in others. When a man with a determined purpose begins a task, he has already won half the battle because everyone who knows him believes that he will accomplish his goal. People recognize that it is useless to oppose someone who uses obstacles as stepping stones, who is not afraid of defeat, and who refuses to shrink from his responsibilities. The persistent individual never stops to consider whether they are succeeding or not. They only focus on pushing ahead, step by step, no matter the obstacles in their way. The importance of backbone. Charles Sumner famously said, 3 things are necessary: first, backbone; second, backbone; third, backbone. A good chance alone is nothing. Education is useless without the strong resolve to make something of it. An encouraging start is pointless without the moral stamina to carry it forward. It is grit, perseverance, and courage that govern the world. Take the example from history when the 7 bishops of the Church of England were tried for refusing to help the king undermine the Protestant faith. Their persistence in the face of adversity led to victory. Similarly, in the face of overwhelming odds, individuals like Disraeli, Lincoln, and President Garfield, who started with humble beginnings, triumphed due to their indomitable will. Success against odds. Irving once said, "It is interesting to notice how some minds seem almost to create themselves, springing up under every disadvantage, and working their solitary but irresistible way through 1,000 obstacles. Opposing circumstances only create strength. Every barrier overcome makes us more capable of facing the next." History is filled with examples of individuals who redeemed themselves from disgrace, poverty, and misfortune through the firm resolution of an iron will. Success is not about what a man accomplishes, but about the opposition he encounters and the courage he uses to maintain his struggle. It's not the distance traveled, but the obstacles overcome that define success. As Henry Ward Beecher put it, it is defeat that turns bone to flint, and gristle to muscle, and makes men invincible, and forms those heroic natures that are now in ascendancy in the world. Do not, then, be afraid of defeat. You are never so near to victory as when defeated in a good cause. The power of adversity. Channing writes, "Every condition, be it what it may, has hardships, hazards, pains. Providence ordains storms, disasters, hostilities, sufferings. The great question whether we shall live to any purpose or not depends on our use of these adverse circumstances. Difficulty is the element, and resistance the true work of man. In essence, hardship is the forge that shapes the strength of the human spirit. Every struggle, every setback, prepares the individual for greater achievements. Only through the fires of adversity does one develop true greatness." Chapter 7. When Moody first visited Ireland, he was introduced by a friend to an Irish merchant who immediately asked, "Is he an OO?" Out and out, that was what OO stood for. Out and out for God, that was what this merchant meant. He indeed is but a wooden man, and a poor stick at that, who is decided in everything else, but who never knows where he is at in all moral relations, being religiously nowhere. The early books of the Hebrews have much to say about the valley of decision and the development of out-and-out moral character. Woefully lacking in a well-balanced willpower is the man who stands side by side with moral evil personified, and hands with it, to serve it willingly as a tool and servant. Morally made in God's image, what is more sane, more wholesome, more fitting for man than his rising up promptly, decidedly, to make the divine will his own will in all moral action, to take it as the supreme guide to go by? It is the glory of the human will to coincide with the divine will. Doing this, a man's iron will, instead of being a malignant selfish power, will be useful in uplifting mankind. God has spoken, or he has not spoken. If he has spoken, the wise will hear. We search the world for truth, we cull the good, the pure, the beautiful, from graven stone and written scroll, from all the flower fields of the soul, and, weary seekers of the best, we come back laden from our quest, to find that all the sages said is in the book our mother read, Whittier. O earth that blooms and birds that sing, O stars that shine when all is dark. In type and symbol thou dost bring the life divine, and bid us hark, that we may catch the chant sublime, and, rising, past the bounds of time, so shall we win the goal divine, our immortality. Carol Norton.
Thank you for joining me on this journey through the book. If you enjoyed this book and want to hear more, consider subscribing to stay updated on future audiobooks. And if there's a specific book you'd love to hear next, let us know in the comments. We'd love to bring it to life for you. Until next time, take care, keep moving forward, and remember that courage is 5 seconds away. See you soon.